Cast your mind back, if you will, to 12th century Europe. Imagine hearing rumours of mystical manuscripts that have been circulating among libraries that speak of a magical substance called the philosopher's stone. This substance promised not only the transmutation of base metals into gold, but also a kind of inner purification, a fire that could both refine matter and grant immortality to the human soul. This was alchemy. Although we often reduce it today to pseudoscience or mystical fantasy, alchemy was once considered the central bridge between material science, philosophy, and the divine. Welcome to the very first episode of The Alchemy of It All. I'm Fiona Meiklejohn, and in this podcast we'll explore the deep intersections of history, psychology, philosophy, spirituality, and science. All the different ways that human beings have looked for transformation and evolution. And in this first intro episode, I'm going to begin by asking, what is alchemy, really? And why does it still matter? And why have I called this podcast The Alchemy of It All? When most people think of alchemy, they probably imagine the stereotype of medieval Europeans stirring cauldrons, muttering over fire in rooms filled with strange symbols. But the ideas and concepts of alchemy are much older and so much broader than this. The earliest known writings about alchemy appear around the 2nd century BCE in both Hellenistic Egypt and in China. In Egypt they appear most in the city of Alexandria, and here is where the art of Egyptian metalcraft met the art of Greek philosophy. I do always feel a slight pang when I think of the ancient city of Alexandria and the great library that once housed almost 1 million scrolls and books. It was founded around 3rd century BCE with the aim of collecting all human knowledge up to that point. Tragically though, over a few hundred years, it was destroyed by fire and wars and religious decrees. Just such a huge loss of cultural heritage and historical knowledge from a world, an ancient world that we will never recover or even really know how much knowledge was lost. Plays by Sophocles and Euripides, historical accounts of earlier Mediterranean civilizations, mathematical, scientific discoveries, and most likely original works by Aristotle, Sappho, and other important philosophers. And I guess it's become one of the great symbols of human knowledge lost to the folly and wars of men. But I digress, and probably will again. But back to alchemy. The oldest known writings on alchemy were by Zosimos of Panopolis, writing in around the 3rd and 4th centuries. His works describe typical alchemical tools such as furnaces, distillation, and transmutation, but also visionary imagery, dream figures being cut apart and purified in fire. For Zosimos, metallurgy and spirituality were inseparable. Over in China, meanwhile, Taoist alchemy was flourishing around the same time. There were 2 strands here: external alchemy, focusing on elixirs often involving mercury and cinnabar, intended to grant longevity and immortality. Also internal alchemy, which emphasized meditation, breath, and circulation of ki energy, transforming the body into a vessel of harmony, all of which formed the foundations of modern Chinese medicine. By the 8th century, Islamic scholars preserved and expanded these traditions. The great polymath Jabir ibn Hayyan is sometimes called the father of chemistry. He wrote extensively on distillation, acids, and laboratory practices, and for him, alchemy was the science of balance and proportion. Now, another digression. If you have not explored the Islamic Golden Age or even heard of it, I highly recommend you do a deep dive. It occurred roughly through the 8th to 13th centuries, and it was a period of extraordinary scientific, philosophical, and cultural discovery. It profoundly shaped Western civilization. Scholars in centers such as Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo translated and preserved Greek, Roman, and Persian texts, while also making groundbreaking contributions in algebra and the foundation of modern mathematics, the foundations of experimental science, medicine. The great Persian physician Avicenna's Canon of Medicine was the European standard textbook for centuries. And astronomy. It was actually a female scientist from Syria who developed and refined the astrolabe, enabling planetary and star mapping and accurate timekeeping and navigation that was used for centuries throughout the world. Amazing stuff. A really important time in history. And finally, on top of that, it was through the translations of Arabic texts into Latin in the 12th century that enabled all of these ideas and the workings of alchemy to finally reach medieval Europe. European scholars seized upon the concepts of alchemy and took alchemical experimentation to new heights. Importantly, the great physician Paracelsus in the 16th century fused alchemy with medicine, ushering in a whole new philosophy that healing required both chemical remedies and spiritual realignment. Probably the most famous of these manuscripts was the Emerald Tablet. Its most famous line reads, "That which is above is like to that which is below, and that which is below is like to that which is above," describing the human microcosm reflecting the cosmic macrocosm and vice versa. This quote has actually endured through the centuries, shortened now to "as above, so below," and has been utilized by scholars, philosophers, occultists, and mystics up to the present day. So now, as we go beyond the surface formulae of alchemy, we find not just laboratory recipes, but symbolic maps of human development. The metals themselves were allegories. Lead represented ignorance or base materiality. Gold symbolized enlightenment, incorruptibility, divine consciousness. To transmute lead into gold was to refine the self. European alchemists describe this journey as the Magnum Opus, the great work. It unfolded in 4 stages. Firstly, dissolution, death, chaos. Then purification, clarity, the washing of the soul. Then came illumination and the dawning of new consciousness. Finally, integration, wholeness, and the completion of the work. Most of us have heard of the Philosopher's Stone now, thanks, of course, to Harry Potter. However, in medieval alchemy, the Philosopher's Stone wasn't really tangible. While some alchemists described it as a physical substance capable of turning base metals into gold or granting immortality through the elixir of life, similar to Harry Potter, deeper study revealed it as a metaphor for enlightenment. It was also a symbol of unity, spirit and matter, conscious and unconscious, heaven and earth. The use of symbols was a foundational aspect of alchemy, and many still are in use today. They were like a secret language representing visual theologies of transformation. Common elemental symbols, planetary symbols, astrological symbols, and the Ouroboros, a snake or dragon devouring itself, all have their origins in alchemy. And another little Harry Potter reference, the famous Deathly Hallows symbol is actually an almost exact replication of the ancient alchemical symbol for the philosopher's stone. Now, let's fast forward to the early 20th century, last century. The great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung stumbled across alchemical manuscripts while working on his theory of the unconscious mind. He quickly realized that the imagery of these alchemical texts mirrored what his patients were reporting in their dreams and fantasies. For Jung, alchemy represented an ancient symbolic language for the process he called individuation, the integration of the shadow, the reconciliation of masculine and feminine energies, and the emergence of the whole self. He wrote, "The alchemists projected the process of individuation into matter. The gold they sought was the incorruptible essence of the human soul." Today, Jung's insights echo in clinical psychology, in the use of symbolism in therapy, in modern psychedelic research, and other current mental health treatments. The alchemical cycle is mirrored, too, in the dark night of the soul. The descent into darkness, the dissolution of the ego, the emergence into light, and finally, the integration of mind, body, and soul. So what does alchemy offer us now, across 2,000 years of knowledge? For me, it is a reminder that transformation is not just on the outside. Every culture that practiced it all used the language of matter to speak about the transformation of the human being. The stages of the Magnum Opus, the great work, are not just ancient, meaningless ideas. They describe the common human condition to this day. We all enter darkness. We all seek purification, illumination, love, happiness, and joy. And if we're willing to put the work in, we integrate these into wholeness. So when I speak of alchemy, I'm not talking about reviving a dead science or philosophy. I'm talking about one of the oldest metaphors for what it means to be a human being. To take what is base, broken, chaotic, and to refine it into meaning, into wisdom, into gold. And that's why I've called this podcast The Alchemy of It All. Because alchemy teaches us that everything in the human experience holds the potential to transform and be transformed. And not only that, transformation itself is the only constant in the story of humanity, both internally and externally. This podcast will be a journey into that story, exploring how across history, in so many different ways, human beings have continually strived for meaning, wisdom, and new worlds. Each episode will take one facet of that process and reveal the hidden connections between past and present, the individual, the collective, and how the great work of transformation continues to unfold for the human race. Thank you so much for joining me on this first introductory episode of The Alchemy of It All. In the coming weeks, I'll be exploring all sorts of fun stuff ranging from secret societies to mind-body medicine, to the history of psychology and philosophy, to the great works of literature and art. I've decided to split the next episode, however, into two parts. I'm going to dive into the transformative power or the alchemy of music and the essential role it has played in the physical, emotional, spiritual, and cultural evolution of the human race throughout history. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, please share with a friend or all of your friends, and please join me again next week as we continue to explore how humanity has always sought to transform itself. Until then, may your own magnum opus continue. Bye-bye.